Love is in the air this Valentine's Day, and we're here to help you understand the different types of love that make up a successful relationship. Stay tuned. All right, so we're talking about love and relationships today.
Let's talk about love.
Let's talk about love.
Where do we start if you start talking about love? It's such
I think there's
broad.
a lot of ways that people characterize what love is, and that everybody has a different definition of what love is. You know, there are a lot of commonalities, but I think there's some differences too.
I think there's also a lot of confusion.
Definitely confusion
as
of
to like
the expectations.
The expectations of love, you know, what's true.
And what that
isn't.
means in a relationship.
Yeah, exactly,
right? Yeah. So we're here to talk about two types of love, right? Which is
Eros. It's one type of love. And Agape. It's another type of love.
Is it agape or is it agape?
I always heard it as agape.
Agape.
But it might be pronounced in a different way.
All right.
You know,
I guess we should have figured that out before we started this, huh?
No, I mean, I think it's either or. I mean, it depends on, you know, whose accent.
Right.
Whose accent. It's kind of like saying it, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't think that
agape.
Again, it's like don't get too caught up in the words. It's the concepts of it that kind of like matter.
Okay, so let's talk about concepts, right? So
yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah.
Eros love is a passionate and romantic love that is characterized by strong physical and emotional attraction.
Yes.
It is the type of love often depicted in fairy tales, Hollywood movies, romances, and is characterized by feelings of excitement, desire, and intense connection.
Yeah. So that's typically what a lot of people...
I know you always talk about like Disney.
Yes, Disney.
The princess movies.
We'll get into that in a minute. Let's put that on the parking lot.
Okay.
Okay, and we'll talk about that in a minute,
We'll
right?
shelve that for a minute.
But let's talk about Eros, right? Eros is Cupid, right? And Cupid, it's typically, you know, has arrows and strikes you with passion and the desire, you know, it's like through the eyes, love attains the heart type thing, right? Because it's like, it's when you're seeing somebody, it's like that gasp, that like, oh, like, damn, you know, in other
like what
terms.
you did when you saw me, right?
Sure, yeah. Yes, I don't. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is that that's like that natural impulse, that thing that comes from here, right? From like your reproductive organs, that passion, that desire to you know be close to that person. You know, that's emotion that is like. It's almost like if you want to become one with that person,
right? You
know, so that's typically the first experience that we feel when it comes to love in our adolescence, right? When we have somebody and we have a crush on someone, or that you know,
like I think my dad, or not my dad, somebody that was a male figure used to say it was like lust. You're in lust.
Yeah, because but again, it's like the lust aspect. It's like it's misunderstandings, right? It's like that. This is what we talk about. We have to talk about things, and we have to listen to different points of views, because you need that lust. You need that first urge to have a connection with someone, you know, and that is a natural impulse that is like attracts you to someone, you know, and you want to be with that person. You want to be like, and you feel that desire. No, because that's what it is. Yeah. He's like, you know, I mean, you laugh.
I just like, no, I think it's funny how you're, yeah, damn. You know,
but again, these are the things that you know, from a male's perspective, you know, which
from a female's perspective as well.
It's like, oh my God, like that excitement, those butterflies in the stomach,
that dreaming about them all the time, thinking about them all the time, can't get them off of your mind. Yeah,
you know, so that's what Eros is. You know, it's that first kind of impulse. To love, to attraction, to passion, you know, which is what a lot of movies and a lot of the Hollywood, particularly in Disney, you know, they depict that eternal romantic love,
right?
You know, which, let me put that out of the parking lot. You know, that's the thing that sells. That's what music. What's the music business is driven on. Yeah, you know, it's that impulse, that desire, and then also the dissolution of that passion, of that initial impulse. You know, listen to any love song or any romantic comedy. It's either about that first initial impulse and the breakaway of that impulse. You know, and you need to understand that.
Country music.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, I get it.
I'm really lighthearted today, so I know.
Yeah. No, but that's what I'm saying. But it's like, but it's not really like just country music. You know, I was talking I was talking to someone today, and they were kind of like putting down country music, and I'm like, look, it's not that. It's like it drives at a certain emotion. You know, and that emotion is that. It's that impulse and the dissolution of that impulse that is what drives a lot of that music. R&B is the same thing. That sexual desire and that passion desire. That's what artists tap into.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, of course.
And
that's what sells.
That's what sells. And that's the emotion. That's the overly active emotion that we're accustomed, particularly when it comes to, you know, that aspect of love.
Right.
Which is the Eros aspect,
right.
You know.
And then conversely, we have the other type of love, which is the agape.
Yeah.
Right. And that is selfless and unconditional love that is focused on the well-being and happiness of the other person. So it's basically a love that's based on caring, compassion, sacrifice, and is often seen as more of a mature, deeper love. Right. So unlike the Eros, the agape love isn't driven by the physical or emotional attraction, but rather by a deep sense of commitment and affection towards the other person.
Yeah. So agape is really the Christian idea, the Christ idea of love. You know, loving thy neighbor as you would thyself. You know, giving to the other person, right? A sacrifice to the other. Being able to, you know, like give your life for the other person. Which is goes beyond the mere physical aspect of Eros, you know. Now, which one is good is which one is bad?
Neither.
It's just
they're just
they're aspects of a totality,
like
right?
Exactly, like the yin and the yang kind of thing.
Exactly, they're aspects of a totality, you know, that need to be addressed. And we're talking right now, particularly because it's Valentine's Day, and all these things are kind of like coming about, and we're seeing the gifts exchanges,
commercialized,
and the commercialized points of views on it. You know, it's about it is the act of giving to someone. I get that aspect. That concept of it, but it's also something that has become a very commercial. But it's important for us to distinguish the two, because even our conversations in society when it comes to relationships are very, I mean, for a lack of a better term, they're very toxic, you know, because in the way that we look at relationships, you know, are we looking at relationships as financial transactions, or are just mainly the physical aspect of Eros without anything on the agape. You know,
those do exist.
Yes.
They do exist, and they're out there, and that's perfectly fine for people if that works for them. But what we're doing is we're talking about having a combination of the both and balancing both of these aspects.
Exactly.
The Eros and the agape. So let's start by reading a quote, because that's what we do. So this one is by Joseph Campbell, and he says that marriage is not a simple love affair. It's an ordeal. And the ordeal is the sacrifice of ego to a relationship in which two have become one. Correct.
Yeah. See, I love this part. It's like, you know, Joseph Campbell is one of those guys, those teachers that I always listen to whenever I need to ask. I have a question and I need to answer it, right? And he says emphatically, you know, it's like a relationship is not a love affair; it's an ordeal, right? And the ordeal is that it's a sacrifice to the other person, and in sacrificing to the other person, it's not that you're sacrificing to the other person alone. It's like you're sacrificing to the relationship, the totality of what you guys have become now. You know, it's like he says, you know, cracking eggs to make an omelet. You know, it's like you're no longer this, it's like you're this. You know, now
you make a conscious choice to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And but the thing is this, right? We live in a society that is very individualistic, right? And it's very assertive of the individuals, which is the West, natural position of the West, which is not a bad position in and of itself. but it is also a different level from my experience, in your experience, I hope. Hope.
We'll see.
From our experience, that there is a level. There's a level, a different level of experience when you share your life with other people, with somebody else, right? And you build your life with somebody else. You know, there is something to be said in this about the marriage vow. You know, for richer or for poor, for better or worse, but I take you, right? And like, it is us. It is not whether you you're matching my financial prowess or you're matching this and that. It's like, that financial aspect is a part of it. And I think that in our society, primarily based on what I've seen with a lot of shows and the rise of this almost like this is it type of mentalities when it comes to independent women, toxic masculinity, and all these different topics, is the inability to look at the totality of the cohesiveness of a relationship, and most people don't look at as the combination of Eros and Agape. They look at it more as an imposition. They look at it more as a financial transaction. They look at it more as a way of just reproducing.
What's in it for me, basically?
What's in it for me as an individual, instead of looking at the totality.
What's in it for
of it
us?
All. Correct. And that's the thing. That's what he's alluding to. That it is hard work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've had, talking about us, because that's all we have to share at this point, is that, we witnessed a lot of other people's relationships, and we've been able to see kind of interactions between them, and not to compare. I'm not trying to compare, but it's interesting how people are very different in their relationships, and how, we're not abstinent from that. You know what I mean? We're not separate from that thought process. And I think that we've been together 22 years this year. Yeah. And that's a long time, and there's, we've had a lot of ups and downs. It's been an ordeal. It's been an ordeal. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of difficulties, lots of challenges, and also a lot of really beautiful times that we've had together, and a lot of things, and a lot of memories that we've made together as a couple. And the one thing that stands out for me in my relationship with you that I've not ever had before, because I was married before, definitely did not have that there, is that while it's been an ordeal, it's been an ordeal in a way that has been positive in my growth as an individual, if that makes sense. Yeah. So speaking from an individualistic perspective, I feel like it's challenged me in my growth and my expectations, and it's pushed me to my limits of what it is, the concessions that I want to make, or that I need to make, or that I want and need to make. And what am I going to do when you're having your downs? What am I going to do to help lift you up, and vice versa? And I think that has been like the beautiful part of our relationship. Yeah. And the things that stand out for me, because you're my best friend. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're like one of my only friends. I have very, very few friends. And so to be able to have somebody that I can share the ugly, the good, the bad, everything with, and not feel judged, or when I do feel that way, to be able to be honest about it and still have that conversation and go through that difficult process, because I think sometimes that is difficult, and to come out on the other side in a better place, is a beautiful thing for me.
Yeah. I think that for me, there was a lot of growing up that I had to do as a person, right? In our relationship. Because yes, that physical aspect, what you call like lust or desire, that passion,
that's definitely there.
But sometimes, but to be honest, sometimes it's like life begins to take that away a little bit, and there's something that that's natural. It's something that you have to work towards that, so you.
I think over time it dissipates, because life gets in the way.
It does get,
but in the also way. You're so used to each other that it's kind of like.
No, I agree. I no. That's,
you don't think so?
No, I don't think that. I think that I think that there's work that goes into it, right? But you took me to my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. But what I was trying to say was the fact that, personally, there's a growing things that I have to go to, that I had to go through, right? And particularly, one of those things for me was the ability to be able to trust and feel comfortable trusting somebody else, in about my inner world and the things that are happening without me. Because for an individual, particularly for a man, it's challenging. And I mean, I think I'm just saying man because that's what I am. But I think for a lot of individuals, it's hard to be like open and like see me for like who truly I am, or the good or the bad, everything that is like the insecurities, all the things that's inside of you. It's like most people can't do that. And when you are sharing your life with someone like you, like my best friend, it's like those things are easier to do. And there are times in which it doesn't always go as smoothly. Yeah. Right? Because it's like, fuck, man. It's like, what's going on? Yeah. But the reality of it's like if you're building your life together, that idea of trust and that idea of being able to feel comfortable expressing who you are and expressing those realities, those things that are fundamental for me to grow as a person, right? And that's something that it took some time. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you that it was like right away. That it was like it took a long time to.
Well, I mean, and that's what I was just saying is that to expose yourself, so to speak, like let somebody into your deepest, darkest areas in your life, is I have not shared everything with anybody but you, even on this show, I've divulged some things, but I haven't shared the other, 80% of what, the feelings, the experiences, what you went through, the crying, the ugly part of it, and feel like I can trust you to share those things. You know what I mean? And feel, like I said, it's sometimes we fall out of alignment, but then once we get back into alignment because that trust is there, then I think we both grow from that experience. And that's what I said earlier is that's what I'm saying.
And I could understand why it's so difficult to be vulnerable. I mean, it's not easy to be vulnerable to others and let somebody else in. That's why it's like in a lot of relationships, people have one foot in, one foot out, right? And it's like, and I say that because in our early years, I was at that stage, like I'm like one foot in, one foot out, because it's like, okay, well, I don't want to get hurt, and I don't want things to happen to me, the Eros, that impulse was there, right? And that natural impulse love was there, but Agape means that you let go, and this is like the Christhood in people, and the Christhood in because Christ loved unconditionally, right? And this is a part of this love that is just open, and when you're open,
when you're vulnerable,
right? And it's like you're naked, and then are you going to be constantly questioning whether somebody's going to take advantage of that. Yeah. And we live in a very cynical world.
Well, now, and we live in a world like that, but even with that, we've been in situations with other people where we've been vulnerable, exposed ourselves, and been taken advantage of. Not in the way that we are with each other, but correct. I mean, so that experience sort of makes you feel like,
But you see that experiences, like things happen in our traumatic experiences as we grow up,
other relationships
and things like that, and then you begin to really close that barrier of, and it's understandable, right? However, there comes a point in which the more you close yourself in, the more challenging it's going to be to ever open up, and people are afraid because, you start looking at statistics and the rates of reports is high, and you got people not getting married as much anymore. People don't see the value of it or the benefits of it, and all this stuff. And again, you can't blame them for feeling like that.
No, because I think one of the biggest difficulties in that is that if you don't find somebody who has the same goals or desires from a relationship, and you're not willing to see each other's point of view in the gives and takes in the relationship, then it's hard to be in alignment. I'm using that word again, but to be on the same page, you fall off the track, so to speak. So how do you have a successful
question? But that begs how do you have a successful relationship is first. But the other question is, because it begs the question, how do you find that person?
That's what I'm saying.
You know, I mean, like, because again, it's like,
because how did we find each other? You know what I mean? It just happened.
And this is when it gets interesting, right? Because yes, you have that impulse, right? And you could get vulnerable, right? And you know, so you got the Eros. Now you could begin to open up in the Agape, right? And then this is the thing that you know becomes interesting about love, right? Because when it's no longer an impulse, right, and that begins to dissipate, but now you're there because you see the, you know, you're feeling that bond and that relationship to the other and everything. So now you're making a choice.
Oh yeah,
right. So then this is when free will comes in, right? And the free will that you experience, right, and the free will that you actually arrive at is the willingness to be hurt.
Yeah.
But again, that is some scary shit.
It is.
That's some scary shit for anybody, male, female, whatever you want to call yourself, whatever it is, in any relationship. It's that, are you willing, the free will to make that choice that goes beyond just the impulse to choose the totality instead of the individual. And then to be able to accept the fate that it may not work out.
Yeah. Again, vulnerability.
But that is the beautiful thing of the quest, right? Because the quest in life in general, it's not about a destination. It's about the experience of what you go through.
Right.
Right? Now, yes, there is the possibility of dissolution, deception, hurt. You know, all that possibility is there.
But on the other hand,
there is also the possibility of love. That bond, that lasts for life. That
friendship,
the unity, that thing that seldom is depicted in movies, because again, it's like movies gives you a story within a certain time frame,
snapshot,
beginning and end. But it's like life is long, you know. You got 24 hours of the day. Sometimes you have a different mood than the other person, and sometimes you guys don't see things the same way. So how, you know, and this is part of the narrative fallacy, right? Because we see pictures of love, of how we imagine it to be and how we want it to be, but the reality of it, that is more. It's much more. It's more challenging. It could be potentially more harmful, but it could be something that is much beautiful, you know. And that's why. And I'm saying marriage, but a relationship in general.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be marriage.
Marriage is an institution in which you know whatever it is, you can go into the definition of all that. But if you decide to make a bond of it, you know, you got to understand also that the consciousness that goes behind it, you know, outside of the impulse, outside of your identity as, you know, the superior or the inferior or whatever people say nowadays, you know, then there's that potential for beauty and the transcendence of like,
and
wow.
I want to make sure that we say this too. Just because we're saying, you know, the unity, the cohesiveness, coming together, building a bond, and it's not losing your identity to that person or sacrificing yourself to that person, but rather it's coming together and developing the bond, the togetherness, the friendship, the commitment, the just everything that goes along with that. Yeah. For the growth of ourself, because I feel like I've grown so much in this relationship and the growth of us.
Yeah.
You know?
See, like, this is a beautiful thing about Joseph Campbell myth and the power of symbols, right? Like the Tai Chi, right, which is the Tao, the Yin and Yang, right? That symbol kind of like it's a visual manifestation of what we're talking about, right? Because that symbol separate doesn't mean anything, right? But combined, it means something. It's like you could see the individual aspects of it, but together it's just a totality, right? And it's kind of like the same concept in a visual way of what a relationship is. Yeah. It's the marriage of two, but that marriage is the balancing of two energies that becomes one. Right? I mean, and it's a beautiful thing. It's like, and that's that's why art, the concept of love in art is so powerful, because it is a sublime thing. Like, holy shit, like, how can you have like these two things? You can't express it, you can't really, how do you articulate it? It's an experience that you have to feel. That's why love is so elusive. Yeah. It's hard to define, and it's hard to define. It's hard to see, because like you have to, like, no one could tell you whether or not you're in love. No. Right? Like no one could tell you that.
And how much love you have for that person.
Exactly. Nobody could tell you you are 96%, and there is no measurement of it, because
no
it's
data.
It's like that. It's like one of those things in life that it doesn't matter how scientifically you try to get to. It's an experience, and most people don't experience it. A lot of people just have glimpses of it, right? And then you try to make sense of it, and all that. But this is what these old rom-coms are all about. How do I make sense of this? How do I do this? Girl, you just gotta let go, you know, and just kind of like, just because it's an experience, and
that's the true part of those movies. Just let go. Just have an experience.
And again, it's like, the beautiful thing, because again, one of those narrative fallacies is that relationship is 50-50, right? Like, it isn't like that. It's not like that. It's like, if you look at things, right, from just a logical standpoint, well, if I make this much money, they need to make this much money, right? If I'm doing this, they need to be at my same level, right? It doesn't always go like that. I mean, those are just physical elementary aspects of a relationship, right? It's like, the earth doesn't revolve in a perfect spiral or in a perfect, circumference, right? It's more oval, and water fluctuates as the earth rotates, right? So it's kind of like that. It's like it just goes, and sometimes, it takes a person, if it goes from one part to another, always trying to find equilibrium. So there's notions of 50-50, they need to be at my level, and all this stuff are very elementary things. And that's what you see in our society right now with regards to relationships. I love the cynicism that our modern society has created about the idea of love, because it's very cynical. It's like, it's like J. Cole, one of his lines is like, nobody talks about love no more. Ain't nobody thinking love no more, But then you go to the window, to the floor, because you're alluding to just the physical aspect of it. But there's an emptiness in our society for the lack of it. It's just some interesting stuff.
No, that's great, because that kind of leads into like how important it is then to have the balance between the Eros and the Agape.
Sure.
And understanding the differences between the two of them and how important they are in a relationship. So we have 5 tips to balance both the Eros and the Agape love. So number 1 is to recognize the importance of both Eros and Agape love in a relationship. So basically making sure that we have a balance and that we understand that balance isn't always going to be equal, but that it exists in a relationship,
and
right?
that it fluctuates. Sometimes like
ebbs and flows, right?
Yeah, ebbs and flows. It's like, you don't feel as sexually attracted to your partner. Maybe you need to work a little harder, and vice versa. Maybe that impulse to be closely together, because it's like you're eating rice and beans all day for 22 years, and you want to try something else. It's like, maybe you shouldn't be trying something, but maybe you need to work on connecting more intimately with. You like that?
Kind of feeling like you're saying I'm rice and beans. No. I know how much you love your rice and beans. I love
rice and beans, and
white rice.
White rice and beans, that's my favorite.
white rice.
You know it. So, okay, we get it on track, right?
We are. But it's cute.
A good analogy.
It's a good analogy. I mean, it's like, right? I'm eating chicken every day. Sometimes I want a steak or shrimp or something.
But, you know, and sometimes you got to kind of like take
You got to dress up that chicken. Dress it up.
Okay, next one.
That was good.
Next
okay. Number 2.
Cultivate
both types of love. So it's important to have both incorporate both into your relationship.
Yeah, you gotta make an effort.
Like we were just saying that you got to make an effort when it comes to the Eros, you know, because that's, you know, you're with somebody for a long time. You're right. You know, things can become stale. Yes. So you have to work at it.
And so that's the first thing that's going to go.
Oh, of course.
I'm just keeping it real. It's like that impulse doesn't last.
No.
So if that impulse doesn't last, it's like a drug, right? Like a junkie looking for a high, constantly looking for a high.
I look at it like, you know, when you have a fire and how there's that slow glowing simmer. It's there. You have love for each other. There's something there. But you got to do stuff. You got to throw some lighter fluid on that and get that going here and there. You know what I mean?
You know, this is like a perfect example because I was looking at something earlier today, right? Because Romeo.
Look it up on your phone?
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet. Because I remember part of the quote, but I don't remember the whole thing. So I got to kind of like read it, right? Because this is what happened in Romeo and Juliet, right? Romeo is constantly in and out of love. Constantly. The impulsive Eros out of him, right? You know, so he's forewarned. And in the novel, this is the foreshadowing, and Shakespeare does a good job at foreshadowing and explaining like these different issues, right? So when they go to get married, Friar Lawrence says this line to him, and I think that this stuff is pretty cool when it comes to understanding that Eros part and how that part could actually be somewhat destructive, right? So Friar Lawrence says, "These violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph died, like fire and powder, which, as they kiss, consume. The sweetest honey is loathsome in his own deliciousness, and in the taste confounds the appetite. Therefore, love moderately."
Yes.
Right. So,
that's good.
If you don't realize that you have to love that impulse, it has to be in moderation, like everything else. The long-term success of your relationship may not be there.
Right. Yeah.
Because you have to.
It's not sustainable. Yeah. It isn't sustainable. Yeah. You're right. Which is great for number 3 because you have to be able to communicate openly and honestly.
Yes.
That's really important. I know that's sometimes that's the vulnerability part that we're talking about being open and sharing and exposing ourselves to the other person. And I think that's difficult, whether it's the physical or the emotional side. In either case, it's difficult to do. So that's important.
And it doesn't help much too that we have like, and I think that we're beginning to be like really, this is one thing about our society that we're beginning to really transform is the very rigid, static roles that we have placed on individuals in society, right? As a whole, like there's things that we could talk about that, but there's a lot of good conversation going about understanding the detriment of such a rigid roles, because when you have such rigid roles, that limits the potential for communication and openness and vulnerability. Okay.
I know what you mean.
Right?
Yeah.
On both sides.
I understand.
On whoever sides it is.
Right.
So like the more that we begin to take the stigma away from vulnerability.
Right. Brene Brown.
Yeah, Brene Brown.
Hashtag.
Yeah.
Maybe she's watching.
And well, hopefully. But those things, that's an important thing. And those are really powerful conversations that we are having as a society.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So number 4 is to prioritize selflessness and sacrifice. So in that, what I get from that is that you got to be able to make compromises and concessions in your relationship.
I mean, I always say this quote. I always say it because I think it's one of the most powerful quotes from the Quran. It says, how dare you think you're going to enter the garden of bliss without facing the trials of those that came before you, right? I think that is a one telling quote, because the reality is that you have to sacrifice. Life doesn't mean anything without sacrifice, and
there's no experience if you're not sacrificing something.
Exactly. You don't know the opposite without sacrifice.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
And lastly, maintain physical and emotional intimacy.
Yeah. Again, that's connecting. That's taking care of that bond.
I want to say this too. It's funny because, we've been talking about both physical and the emotional side of relationships and love, right? And one of the things that a lot of people feel is that relationships are about that physical, right? Like that's the driving, that's important. If you don't have that, you got nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And while that is important, because not only is it a want, but it's also a need for people. I think that's important to have physical closeness with somebody and be close to somebody in that way, in a vulnerable way, right? Mm-hmm. That being emotionally intimate is important. And somebody broke this down to me once a long time ago. And he said, intimacy is into me, see. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was beautiful because I was just like, wow. So it's not just about sex and the physical aspect of love, but it's about that emotional, which is what we've been talking about, being vulnerable and exposing ourselves to the other person. Yeah. And letting go of the boundaries and having trust in another individual. And that's the beauty of love.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you found our discussion helpful and informative. Comment below with your thoughts and remember to stay connected by subscribing and sharing.